So on the night of October 7th, 1997, the police in Linares, Spain, got a call from a phone booth. A man on the other line explained that he and his wife were tourists and they had just found a boy. He looked to be about 14 or 15 years old, and he didn't have any identification or documents on him. The boy was very scared and all alone. And when this couple tried to give him food, he refused. The man told police that they should send someone over right away. The police didn't get a name from this caller, but that man was actually Frederick. And he was not a tourist, he was not with his wife, and he did not find a boy in the phone booth. There was no boy. It was a work of fiction. And now Frederick was going to get back in character. He was going to pretend to be an abandoned teenage boy so that the police would take him in and send him to a group home. There, he would have a roof over his head, 3 meals a day, and other kids to spend time with. But Frederick wasn't a kid. He was 23 years old. But he is unusually young looking for his age, especially around this time. So his boyish looks and very good acting skills would hopefully be all he needed to sell the act to the cops. But why pretend to be a kid? Frederick was trying to fill a void in his life the size of Nantes, France. It seems like he was trying to feel wanted, trying to feel like he belonged, and Frederick was looking for the love that he never got as a child. He never wanted to grow up, so going to a group home was the goal. At the home, he would be cared for, pitied, paid attention to, and he would get to hang out with other kids just like him. So when the police arrived, Frederick knew it was go time. So the officers get to the scene and they find a boy huddled up in the phone booth. Rain was falling and he looked cold and frightened. He was wearing a big coat and kids' clothing. There was also a hat hanging low over his head, making it hard to see his eyes. Frederick really needed to sell the act. He had to look scared and pitiful so the officers would feel bad for him and treat him gently. Instead of some street urchin or delinquent teen, the cops needed to treat him like a child who had been hurt. And sure enough, when the cops tried to grab him, he pretended to flinch. So they helped him out of the phone box and into the back of the patrol car. So far, his plan was working. Frederick didn't speak, even when the police asked him questions like his name. And when they got back to the station, Frederick still wasn't talking. The police didn't know what to do. If he didn't talk, they couldn't hold him. That was the idea for Frederick. If he stayed silent long enough, they'd take him to a group home. And that's exactly what happened. But his plan wasn't entirely successful because according to him, this group home was one of the rare ones in Spain that demanded children have some sort of identification. So he knew he had to come up with something quick. If he couldn't trick them with a new identity, he would go to jail. So Frederick told the staff that he was an American who ran away from home. He would call his family, but only if he could do it, not the staff. But when he was picked up, it was the middle of the night back in the States. So he conveniently explained that he couldn't call his parents right then and there. He needed just 24 hours in the office to prove his identity. And just like that, the staff accepted his request. And this is where Frederick got to work. He called up the American police and pretended to be a Spanish policeman. He said there was an American boy there who must have been missing for a few years. The police gave him the number for National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Virginia. Then Frederick explained the situation to them. He said there was an American boy aged 14 to 15, but they didn't know who the boy was. So Frederick started to give Necmec a very vague description of what he looked like. Short, brown hair, prominent chin with a gap between his teeth. He wanted the child that they suggested to look like him. The lady on the other end told him that she might have a match, Nicholas Barclay from San Antonio, who went missing on June 13th, 1994. Then the lady faxed over a black and white copy of Nicholas's missing poster. Frederick took a good look at it and he thought he'd be able to pass for Nicholas, whose appearance would have changed after 3 years, of course. He knew it would be risky, but he called back Necmec and told them that there was a match. Nicholas Barclay was sitting right next to him. And just like that, Frederick's new plan was in motion. He would get to move to America, where he'd have a family, be taken care of, loved. He just had to make sure he could pull it off.
So finally, after 3 hours of Nicholas being missing, Beverly got a call that he was alive in Linares, Spain. Carrie, as you can imagine, was absolutely shocked when her mother called with the news. She had no idea how Nicholas could have ended up there, but the joy she felt was incredible. Carrie ended up calling the shelter back and talking to someone at the shelter named Jonathan. What she didn't know was that Jonathan was actually Frederick. Jonathan explained that he was sitting next to Nicholas at the moment. And as the story goes, Nicholas had been kidnapped and held by a child sex trafficking ring. Luckily, he'd been able to escape, but he was very traumatized and he'd been abused. He'd forgotten about a lot of things and he remembered Carrie, but not that much. Carrie asked to talk to Nicholas, of course. Frederick listened while she told Nicholas how much she loved him and missed him and how they were going to bring him home. Frederick pretended to be Nicholas and responded with a faint, "I love you." And when Carrie heard that, she burst into tears. Later on, Carrie got into contact with Nancy Fisher, an agent at the FBI field office in San Antonio, and Nancy was very shocked by what Carrie told her. She told Carrie that once they got back to the States, Nicholas would need to be interviewed. The next day, NCMEC sent the shelter a file with one of Nicholas's missing posters printed in color. So when Frederick saw the color photo of Nicholas, his stomach dropped. Because of course, Frederick looks nothing like Nicholas. Frederick had dark hair and dark eyes, whereas Nicholas had blonde hair and blue eyes. They didn't look alike at all. Nicholas also had 3 tattoos, the letter J on his left shoulder, the letter T on his left hand between his thumb and forefinger, and the letters L and N on his outer left ankle. And obviously, Frederick didn't have any of these tattoos. So at this point, Frederick thought, I'm absolutely screwed. He actually burned the missing persons poster and panicked. And from there, he tried to make a run for it. When an officer from the consulate showed up to the shelter, Frederick was actually missing. So that officer and a shelter staff member drove around looking for Frederick. Eventually, they found him and took him back. The next day, the staff informed him that his sister was coming in from San Antonio to pick him up. At this point, Frederick knew that there was no way out, other than going to prison. So it was time to get creative. Frederick actually bleached his hair, and he had a girl from the shelter give him the 3 stick and poke tattoos using pen ink. Meanwhile, Carrie knew that her mother Beverly wouldn't be able to handle the flight, so she flew out to Spain herself to get Nicholas. When Carrie finally got to the shelter, she immediately recognized the boy as Nicholas. Frederick was kind of surprised by how quickly Carrie hugged him and felt his face. She touched his nose and told him that she remembered that nose and that he'd always looked like their Uncle Pat. Frederick was very quiet during their little reunion. The shelter and the consulate staff gave Carrie a moment alone with her younger brother in the visiting room, and this is when Carrie pulled out dozens of old photos and started showing them to Frederick. She gave descriptions of each picture, asking if he remembered their old house or remembered playing with cousins, and Frederick kept the act up. He'd make comments about Jason and Beverly looking the same, or saying that Carrie's son must have grown a lot, and said he missed their grandma. Meanwhile, Carrie was surprised at how different Nicholas now looked. She thought he must have grown up since he went missing, but to her he still looked like their Uncle Pat, and his tattoos were still the same. He didn't speak much, and when he did, it sounded weird, but Carrie chalked it up to the fact that he'd gone through a lot of incredibly brutal things. The judge in Linares wanted some sort of proof that this boy was Nicholas before she just let him leave with Carrie, so she told him that he needed to identify the people in 5 family photos that he'd never seen before. Sure enough, Frederick was able to name all the people in 4 of the 5 pictures. He made a mistake on the last one, but the judge thought 4 out of 5 was good enough, so she let him go. The thing is that they didn't know Frederick had already seen those photos, because Carrie had shown him all of them in the visiting room. Frederick said that without having seen the photos before, he would have failed all of them. But Frederick was obviously not going to say anything. He had pulled it off so far, so they took his passport photo, stamped it, and he and Carrie were on their way.
Now, looking at this passport photo, unbelievable that no one caught on at this point. I mean, he clearly looks over the age of 20. He does believe that maybe she knew and was just going with it.
Carrie said that he was acting very anxious when they got to the airport. He was always looking around and going to the bathroom or staring at her. But according to Frederick, Carrie was the one staring. On the plane ride, Frederick started freaking out, realizing he couldn't get out of his situation. But Carrie just thought he was anxious about the plane. But finally, on October 18th, 1997, they arrived in Texas. The family was waiting for Nicholas and Carrie at the airport. And when Frederick walked off the jet bridge, he was overwhelmed. The family was so happy to see him. They all hugged him and told him how much they missed him. Everyone was there. Carrie's husband, Brian Gibson, Cody Chantel, Beverly, and Chantel remembered that Beverly was not as excited as everyone else. She just didn't have the reaction you expect to see from a mother whose missing son had just come home. Frederick, of course, was quiet and distant. He kept his hat down low, his scarf up, and his sunglasses on, and he didn't really like to be touched. He was very happy to be with his new family, but he was afraid of being caught, so he kept his walls up.
So their family decided that Nicholas would live with Carrie and her husband Brian and their 2 kids. She and Brian owned a trailer home in Spring Branch, which is located 35 miles north of San Antonio. Beverly worked nights, so they figured it would be better if he wasn't left alone. And Texas wasn't exactly the America that Frederick had imagined. He'd thought he'd be in a big city. He only knew what he had seen in movies, so he was definitely a bit shocked when they got to this cramped trailer. Frederick had to share a room with Cody and sleep on a foam mattress on the floor. But at the end of the day, he was happy that he at least had a family that cared for him now. There was always a worry that the real Nicholas would walk through the door any day. And Frederick, at that point, would obviously be caught. And that kept him on edge. But that day never came. So as time went on, Frederick really started to settle into his new life. As far as anyone knew, the Nicholas Barclay story had ended in a miracle. And Frederick believed that he had pulled off the ultimate con.
Lloyd TV show Hard Copy wanted to do an episode on Nicholas. They hired private investigator Charlie Parker to track him down on November 1st, 1997. They were actually taping the show when Charlie noticed something very odd. Nicholas's ears. Just by chance, he'd been standing near a booth that had a picture of young Nicholas Barclay on it, so he could see both that picture and Frederick from the same direction. The ears didn't match. This man was not Nicholas Barclay. He was an imposter. Charlie immediately called Nancy Fisher and told her about his discovery. She was apprehensive at first. She didn't think she could question a family who said that this boy was their son, because how could they get that wrong? Who had just taken some random stranger from Europe? But Nancy had her suspicions, but she didn't have enough information to really act on them yet. Nancy immediately called the U.S. Attorney's office and asked what she should do, and they advised her to let Carrie take this person home, but only temporarily. She was still dumbfounded. She told Carrie on the phone that this person was not her brother, but according to Carrie, Nancy didn't put it in those words.
Then, in December, Frederick tried running away. Frederick had stolen Brian and Carrie's car and driven to Oklahoma, where he was then pulled over for speeding, and he was arrested. And Beverly, Carrie, and Brian took him back home. According to Frederick, Beverly treated him more like a ghost than her own son. Interesting. And one night, he said that she'd gotten drunk and screamed at him, "I know that God punished me by sending you to me. I don't know who the hell you are." Still, she continued to insist that this boy was actually Nicholas. Interesting. And Nancy Fisher knew that if she took blood and fingerprint samples from the imposter, it would prove that he was not Nicholas. But when she requested that Beverly bring him in to take the samples, she said that this person was her son, and she didn't have to hand anything over. Frederick said that he realized the truth. They were all pretending, just like he was. It's almost like they were exactly what each other needed. The family knew Nicholas was not coming back because maybe they'd killed him. On March 3rd, 1998, the results got back to the FBI. The embassy in Spain found a match. The imposter's name was Frederick Bourdin, and he was not a 16-year-old boy. He was a 23-year-old French serial imposter.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.